Hello again, everybody. Hello again. I could not let this one go. I had to share it. I just had to share this. If you think I was lying about this Muslim god, even Japan don't want them in their country. They are not playing, okay? When every nation is rising against you, even your own nation, because you wouldn't be running all over to everybody else's nation if you was looking for a place of protection or trying to escape from whatever you going through in your own country. But your own country don't even want you. Your own nation don't even want you. They don't even come to your defense. They don't. Even Japan is like, get out of here. We don't want you here. Japan clash with Islam is escalating. They're escalating over there. I'm going to play the video.
That's not xenophobia, that's identity.
Yeah,
And when
let's
the
start
rest
from
of
the
the
beginning,
world
y'all.
opened, while the West drowned in its own diversity, Japan watched and remembered who it was. Not with panic, not with shame, but with the cold, ancient clarity of a country that knows what it's willing to die for. In a world that celebrates mass immigration, Japan says no. Not because it's racist, but because it refuses to become something else just to survive. Its population is collapsing, its economy is aging, and every global expert insists open the gates or fade into history. But Japan would rather fade as Japan than survive as something unrecognizable. That's not xenophobia, that's identity. And when the rest of the world opens its arms to problems it can't control, Japan tightens its grip on the katana. Because this is a nation that believes some things are worth more than growth: cohesion, culture, order, honor. And as the global tide of migration swells, Japan makes its stand, not with slogans, but with silence and steel. Let's break down what's happening and why Japan may be the last country left that says we choose who we are over who the world wants us to become. Japan is dying, not from war, not from disease, but from something far quieter and far more unstoppable: silence. The silence of empty schoolyards, the silence of villages where only footsteps belong to the elderly, the silence of maternity wards that see fewer babies every single year. In 2024, Japan recorded just 686,000 births, yet another historic low. Deaths now nearly double births annually. Entire towns have become ghost villages, their windows shuttered, their streets hollow. By 2045, over 36% of Japan's population will be senior citizens. The workforce is collapsing, pensions are buckling, hospitals are overwhelmed, and the tax base shrinking faster than anyone can fix. The Japan International Cooperation Agency ran the numbers. Their conclusion was brutal. By 2040, Japan will be nearly 1 million foreign workers short of what it needs just to maintain modest economic growth. Not thrive, just survive. Any rational government would do the obvious thing: open the doors to mass immigration, let young workers flood in, fill the factories, pay the taxes, and keep the lights on. But Japan? Japan looks at Europe, looks at Sweden, looks at France, looks at the chaos, the cultural clashes, the parallel societies forming in cities that used to be unified. And Japan says, no, that will not be us. If Europe is aging, Japan is fossilizing, yet it still refuses to trade culture for survival. But while the birth rate is collapsing, something else is quietly rising, and not everyone in Japan is happy about it. 20 years ago, Japan had roughly 15 mosques scattered around the entire country. Today, around 160. 20 years ago, there were around 100,000 Muslims in Japan. By the end of 2024, that number had swelled to an estimated 420,000, nearly quadrupling in 2 decades. Still tiny, just 0.3% of a nation of 125 million. But for a society that has been homogenous for over 1,000 years, this is a seismic cultural shift. Islamic schools have opened. Islamic cemeteries are being established. Halal ramen shops now operate next to sushi bars. In Tokyo and Kobe, mosques host Japanese converts praying alongside immigrant families from Indonesia, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. None of this was expected. Japan never designed itself for multiculturalism. It didn't build the infrastructure, the language programs, or the social frameworks that other nations reluctantly assembled. And yet, the change is happening anyway. In pockets of Saitama Prefecture, just north of Tokyo, immigrant communities have begun to form. In one city, Warabi, roughly 3,000 Kurdish Muslims now reside, enough that netizens have derisively nicknamed the area Warabistan. That name is meant as mockery, but beneath the joke is something deeper: anxiety. Each new mosque, each new halal market, each new minaret silhouetted against the Japanese skyline poses a question that many are afraid to ask aloud. Will the nation bend or will it break? Then came the spark that would change everything. Not a mosque, but a murder. July 2025, Saga Prefecture, a quiet rural corner of Kyushu Island, rice paddies, modest homes, the kind of place where doors are left unlocked. A 40-year-old Japanese language teacher was at home with her elderly mother. She had spent her career helping foreigners learn Japanese, bridging cultures for a living. And then a young man forced his way inside. He was frantic, aggressive, armed with a knife. He demanded money. In the struggle that followed, he stabbed the younger woman repeatedly, killing her. He slashed the 70-year-old mother, leaving her badly wounded. Then he fled into the night with 11,000 yen, roughly 74 US dollars. That's what her life was worth to her killer. The murderer? A 24-year-old Vietnamese man, a guest worker who had been employed at a nearby poultry farm under Japan's technical intern training program. In most countries, this would be one crime among thousands. Tragic, but unremarkable in the broader statistics. But Japan is not like most countries. Japan's homicide rate hovers around 0.2 per 100,000, among the lowest on Earth. A violent home invasion by a foreigner is virtually unheard of. National media gave the saga killing wall-to-wall coverage. The victim's face appeared on every channel. The details, the knife, the elderly mother left bleeding, the pittance stolen, burned into the public consciousness. And the timing? The timing was explosive. The murder came just 6 days after the nationalist Sansaito Party shocked Japan with its best ever election results. Politicians who had been warning about foreign crime for years suddenly looked prophetic. On social media, outrage ignited like wildfire. If we hadn't brought in guest workers, this mother would still be alive, read one comment that went viral. First a Vietnamese, next time maybe a Pakistani or African. How many must die? Hashtags trended calling for stricter immigration controls. Small protests formed in Saga and Fukuoka with signs reading, "Protect our citizens" and "Don't forgive foreigner crime." Almost overnight, immigration, especially from Muslim-majority and African countries, returned to the center of national debate. What was once a topic for bureaucrats became personal, emotional, and urgent. And once the fear took hold, the data followed. Officially, Japan doesn't like to talk about crime by nationality. National police rarely break down arrests by immigrants versus natives, partly to avoid stoking discrimination. But Saitama Prefecture is different. Saitama published.
I usually don't go through my whole videos like this, but this one I didn't watch. I saw the title and I said, let me look at it and let me see. Japan clashes with Islam is escalating. And I just wanted to share this on my platform today, on my channel today. Just give some commentary about it. But to learn that this problem is only not only starting to become a problem in the United States, but all over the world, where people want to migrate, mass migrate into your country, and then they change in some of the culture, they bring in crime. Like they just showed this poor elderly woman. This woman was a good woman. She welcomed these foreigners in. She was even teaching them, Japanese or whatever. And here comes her life. Her mother, accustomed where they used to welcoming people in their home and even leaving their doors open in Japan. That's their culture. That's their custom. And it's scary that it has to change when you bring people in that don't understand the culture and respect when they come in your country not to commit crimes. And it just changes everything. You want to be, friendly to people. You want to help people, but you got to be really careful about what you're doing when you're opening your doors to people that come from a totally different culture and a way of life. where this is what is normal to them to go in somebody's home and stab and kill the elderly woman. That was very personal.
Has detailed crime statistics, including arrests of foreign nationals. Recently, those numbers were leaked and analysed, and what they revealed sent shockwaves through Japanese social media. According to the 2022-2023 arrest data, Turkish nationals, mostly Kurdish asylum seekers, had an arrest rate 15 times higher than Japanese locals. 15 times. African nationals were roughly 3.4 times higher. Other Asian groups, South Asians, Southeast Asians, clocked in around 1.5 to 2 times higher. Westerners, about the same as Japanese. Chinese, roughly equal. Koreans, many of whom are long resident ethnic Koreans born in Japan, actually had lower arrest rates. But it was that Kurdish figure, 15 times higher, that dominated the conversion. It spread across message boards, was cited by politicians, and became a rallying cry for those demanding tighter borders. Saitama has a small Kurdish community of around 2,000 people concentrated in Kawaguchi city. Many are asylum seekers from rural Turkey. In 2023, a brawl between Kurds in Kawaguchi involving a knife fight over a personal dispute made national news. Shortly after, an anti-Kurdish protest erupted in that same city. Demonstrators chanted for the Kurds to go home. Some protesters were later sued for hate speech. For ordinary Japanese citizens reading these statistics, the conclusion felt chilling. Some groups don't integrate. Some immigrants do bring crime. And now, to be fair, foreigners still account for a tiny fraction of total crime in Japan. Over 95% of arrestees nationwide are Japanese. The numbers are small in absolute terms. But people don't fear statistics. They fear what they see. They fear what they read. And the perception took root. If Japan opens the door wider, chaos will follow. Will Tokyo have no-go zones one day? Will Osaka see immigrant riots? Will small rural towns get taken over by foreign cultures? These are the scenarios nationalists paint, and an increasing number of Japanese find themselves unable to completely dismiss the possibility. The numbers sparked a question no one wanted to answer. How far is Japan willing to go to protect its identity? The answer came on July 20th, 2025. Japan held elections for its upper house, the House of Councillors, and when the dust settled, a party that barely existed 3 years ago had just become the fourth largest opposition force in parliament, San Saito. In 2022, they had one seat. By the end of the election night 2025, they had 15. Their vote share hit 12.6%, the third highest of any party. Their slogan? Japanese First. Their platform reads like a manifesto pulled from the populist playbook sweeping Europe and America. Strict caps on immigration, warnings about cultural replacement, demands to limit foreign land ownership, and fierce oppositions to what they call a silent invasion of foreigners. San Saito's leader, Sohei Kamiya, is a former YouTuber turned firebrand politician. He launched the party during the COVID pandemic, initially gaining traction with
In my banking career, I did work for a Japanese bank. Not very long because they look for, oh my God, they don't look for no errors whatsoever. Any little thing you might have done, like if you had made a small error, whatever, they don't take that very lightly. They look for perfection. Okay, they really do. And I worked with a Japanese bank, Daiichi, in my very beginning of my career after I left the English bank and I went to work for a Japanese. And I know their culture sort of kind of like what they look for. And if they see anything that just don't seem right and it ain't working right, they get on it right away. They watch American and they compete with America economically, whatever you want to call it, culturally, economic, what you want to call it. They opened their doors. Japan was like kind of closed, but they did try to trust opening their homes to people to come to be in Japan. I had a cousin who went there for some kind of study, international study. And she came back and she told us how she really enjoyed her visit there. She was very young when she went. She was no more than like 17 years old. But still, she enjoyed that experience. And she said they were very warm and welcoming to her and, kind. and everything while she went there to study. But she came back, of course. That was a very expensive trip, and it was a very well, getting her some culture, around seeing places of the world and stuff. And she came back and shared some of her experience. I had a niece who was also married to a Japanese, so they're different. Okay, as far as like a way we think, a Japanese, they gonna make sure they ain't gonna, they ready to do what they have to do. Excuse me. When they see some mishappenings and things that just don't seem right. You know what I'm saying? They gonna protect they culture. They're very much into protecting their culture. They're not alike Americans. And that's what a lot of people don't like about Americans, because we too free. We allow things too open. We too open. And some things we just don't need to be too open about. In Japanese, and they on to it. So let's go back to the video. They on to it.
Vaccine content before pivoting to immigration. He openly draws inspiration from Donald Trump's MAGA movement and Europe's surging far-right parties. Under globalism, multinational companies have changed Japan's policies for their own purposes, Kamiya declared at a recent rally. If we fail to resist this foreign pressure, Japan will become a colony. But here's what makes Sanseto's rise remarkable. Their voters aren't the elderly ultra-nationalists of the past. Exit polls showed the party was most popular among men aged 18 to 39. Among first-time voters aged 18 to 19, a stunning 20% cast their ballots for Sanseto. 1 in 5 young adults choosing the far right in their very first election. Young, disaffected, angry about stagnant wages and rising prices. They resent overcrowded tourist spots and headlines about foreign crime. They feel ignored by the ruling elite. At Sanseto rallies, college students stand shoulder to shoulder with office workers, all shouting a very clear message. Japan must stay Japan. They're not alone. A broader Japanese first movement is brewing. In September 2025, a politician named Yosuke Kawai held a rally atop a campaign truck in Saitama, draped in the Japanese flag. He thundered to the crowd, "I am fighting so that women can once again walk alone in the city at night." A direct insinuation that foreign criminals have made the streets unsafe. Around 200 people gathered to cheer him on under heavy police watch. Scenes like this were unheard of in Japan a decade ago. Now, they're increasingly common. Even more extreme, the fringe Japanese First Party, led by nationalist agitator Makoto Sakurai, has staged protests calling specifically for the deportation of Muslim immigrants. In June 2025, Sakurai supporters marched through Tokyo demanding that Kurdish asylum seekers be expelled from the country. "Save our motherland," their banners read, as if an army were at the gates. But this isn't just politics, it's something older, something forged in steel. To understand why Japan resists so fiercely, you have to understand its soul. For over 1,000 years, Japan has lived by a code: purity, discipline, sacrifice. This is the land where warriors once chose death over dishonor, where harakiri, ritual suicide, was not madness but meaning. Devotion to one's people outranked devotion to oneself. That ethos never fully died. It evolved, but it endured. And now it guides Japan's stance on mass immigration. Japan would never officially frame it this way. No politician will stand in the diet and say, "We prefer to shrink and die rather than absorb millions of foreigners," but the cultural instinct is undeniable. Japan has watched the West with something between fascination and horror. It watched Germany take in 1 million Syrian refugees in 2015 and saw what followed. The Cologne New Year's Eve assaults, the rise of the AfD, a nation divided against itself. It watched France's banlieues burn. It watched Sweden go from one of Europe's safest countries to one grappling with gang shootings and grenade attacks. And it decided that experiment ends at our shores. Japanese media reported these European troubles with almost morbid attention.
I don't think people should migrate or immigrant to people's country and have any kind of rights to stay there. I think it should be temporarily if they come for education or temporarily for work, but they must leave. We're not going to change our system. We're not going to change our constitution. We're going to protect it. And then on top of that, we're going to continue to keep our identity. That's what America needs to fight for, because America allowed too many people to come into America that don't really have their best interest in America. They just came here and they got comfortable. They lived here, and then they want to come in and they want to change the culture. They want to change the identity. They want America to be their country. And that's where America needs to draw the line, just like Japan is drawing the line, that they not letting people come in and take over their identity. They are Japan, and these are the things that they stand on: purity, and whatever else they said here, everything that has to do with who they are. Now they welcome you in, you come to work, and things of that nature, whatever. But when you come in my country and you start committing crimes, then you start making all of this rebelling against our government, rebelling against the government and everything, and just committing these type of things that you bring in with you from your own country. You ain't do it in your own country, but you're gonna come in my country and do it. Oh no, I'm with Japan 100%. Yeah, get rid of these people. Stay with your identity. Now, like I said, I worked with Japanese. I don't see too many Japanese communities in America. I lived here all my life. I seen Chinatown, but I never seen Japantown. You know what I'm saying? Because they keep their culture. They try to stay within themselves. They'll come here, they'll work, they'll do work here, they'll become a doctor, come and work here for to be a doctor. But they always stay loyal to who they are and where they came from. They not giving up their identity. We don't have a problem with having to deport Japanese people. They got their own wealth, their own country, they own everything over there. So they really like don't think like us. They think ahead of the game, you know.
Every terrorist incident, every riot is broadcast as a cautionary tale. The underlying message: this is what happens when you let in too many too fast. Japan's Justice Minister Kaisuke Suzuki said it explicitly in 2025. We must avoid the tensions and disturbances seen in some European countries. The challenge is to adjust the pace at which we accept foreigners. Translation: not here, not now, not ever. At least, not at scale. If Europe.
And the thing is that I worked with the Japanese community. I worked for Japanese people when I was very, very young, though, very, very young. So the little that I did study them, and I did learn from. And one time, a Japanese guy did take me out to dinner, to lunch. I'm sorry, to lunch, because I found a check outside that belonged to a Japanese company and had a name on it. It wasn't cash, it was in an envelope. And I found it. I picked it up, I found it. So what I did is I called the company that it came from. It was from my some Japanese bank name in New York, down in the city. And I never forget, I called the company and I told them that I found a check that belonged to such and such a person. And I told them where I was, and blah blah. That guy was so happy I found that check. He he said, I want to pay you a favor. He took me to lunch. He took me to wherever best restaurant he can basically take me to eat. We had a conversation. Very nice Japanese guy. You know, I never, since I lived in New York or whatever like that, and because New York is the place where mostly all is a sanctuary place, so you get people from all different places of the world, and people have companies from all different places of the world in New York. Okay, that's where the world's wealth is at. So we got the world. Well, we had the World Trade Center. We have the Stock Exchange. We had only building don't really belong there in New York is United Nations building. But other than that, every all. So anyway, the Japanese guy took me out. We had a great conversation, and he said some nice things about Black Americans. Being around our culture and everything else like that. And that was all. It was done and over with. They don't really come to America. To me, I don't know. I don't have, from what I experienced, they don't really come and bring trouble to our country. If anything, they usually come here for to do business or whatever, and they go back on home to their country and build. They don't. They don't really give up their identity as much as all these other countries come in and they want to say, oh, they want to be American. And then again, they don't want to be American because they still got ties to their country, and they come here and they bring problems and troubles. And and chaos or whatever. But for the Japanese people, from what I experience from the Japanese people, they usually try to stay to themselves. They build, they try to be more up to date with things and even more advanced with things, but they don't really go in people's country just trying to change them, their customs and their cultures. They don't do that. They don't do that. So I don't think people should be going over there thinking they're gonna bring their culture into their country. Just leave. You come, they let you in, they let you enjoy your stay, but don't come there trying to cause problems, because then you gonna f around and find out.
America bend under the weight of diversity, Japan will not bend. It will remain itself or fade away trying. The concept of hijrah in Islam, migration for the sake of faith or betterment, meets the concept of harakiri in Japan, death before dishonor. In this collision of worldviews, Japan chooses the sword over the prayer rug. It's a stance almost inconceivable to Western policymakers who prioritize economics and growth above all. But in Japan's view, survival without identity is not survival at all. But even if Japan refuses permanent migrants, what about the ones who just visit? In 2024, Japan was overrun, not by armies, by tourists. A record 36.9 million international visitors flooded the country, and 2025 is on track to shatter that. 21.5 million foreigners arrived in just the first 6 months alone, a 7.6% increase over the previous year's pace. The effect on daily life has been drastic. Streets in Kyoto that were once quietly enjoyed by locals are now packed wall to wall with tour groups. Trains are so overcrowded with luggage-toting sightseers that commuters can barely board. Historic temples struggling with visitors who don't follow the rules, people treading on off-limits areas, littering, making noises in sacred spaces. On social media, a term went viral, Meiwaku Gaikokujin, troublesome foreigners. Videos spread of tourists bathing in public fountains, dressing in shrine costumes for TikToks, flouting train etiquette. Each clip fuels resentment. They come here and treat our country like a theme park. Prices have surged, rents and hotel rates have spiked across major cities. Local residents in popular areas find themselves priced out of their own neighborhoods. For many Japanese, foreigners are no longer an abstract concept seen on TV. They're everywhere, every day in real life. And instead of fostering openness, this exposure has often bred irritation. In late 2025, the Aichi Prefecture government near Nagoya launched a campaign to attract Muslim tourists. The slogan, "Share Aichi's charm with the world's Muslims." The backlash was immediate. Within days, over 443 complaint emails and 76 angry phone calls flooded the prefecture offices. It will lead to immigration, critics fumed. Why only Muslims? Suspend this project at once. On social media, some claimed Aichi will be taken over by Muslims if left unchecked. The campaign had nothing to do with permanent immigration, but the public reaction assumed it was a Trojan horse, and that fear killed it. The psychology is clear. If this is what tourists do, what would permanent residents bring? And if tourists sparks this much backlash, refugees are out of the question. Japan maintains one of the strictest refugee policies in the developed world. While Europe absorbed hundreds of thousands of Syrian and Afghan refugees in 2010, Japan's approvals have been microscopic. In 2023, a record 13,800 people applied for asylum in Japan, fleeing places like Turkey, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and India. How many were accepted as official refugees? 303. 303 human beings, a record high for Japan, but minuscule by any global standard. And in 2024, that number dropped to 190. For perspective, the European Union's average acceptance rate is around 30 to 40%. Japan's, roughly 1.5%. Human rights organizations regularly criticize Japan for this stance. They argue a wealthy nation should do more for people fleeing war and persecution. But surveys consistently show Japanese public opinion heavily supports keeping refugee admissions low. There is little political cost to being strict, and potentially a high cost to being lenient. Japan's approach is cold but consistent. Give money, not entry. The country ranks as one of the top financial donors to the UN Refugee Agency, but it accepts almost no refugees itself. We'll help them there so we don't have to bring them here. That's the unspoken policy. To the average Japanese citizen, allowing thousands of refugees from the Middle East or Africa risks mass transformation of their communities. They envision unfamiliar cultures, religions, and behaviors that Japan cannot absorb at scale. Refugees today, immigrant communities tomorrow, and Japan fears that transformation more than it fears economic decline. But this isn't just about policies, it's about Japan making a once-in-a-century choice. The numbers are unforgiving. By 2040, Japan will need 6.74 million foreign workers to maintain even modest economic growth. At current
Nah, I wouldn't think so. If they stay on the track that they are, they be fine. You know what I'm saying? Because at least you don't need big to be good. You don't need a big, all of this stuff to be good. You could just stay quietly and content. Okay? And I think they have that to do that. Americans, I don't know. They have that contentment in them. They not greedy. They can make best of wherever they at. They disciplined people. They have that discipline. We as Americans, we don't have that. They keep a strong hold on everything. That's how Japan is. They keep a strong. They see something that ain't working right, and they know it's gonna be a problem. They ain't letting it in, and they mean that. I worked with them. They ain't gonna let anything get by with them. But anyway, especially when they know that it's gonna eventually, like they said, we let them come in, and then all of a sudden, it's immigration, and then all of a sudden, it's gonna be too many of them, and it's gonna be none of us, and they're gonna just change our culture and our customs and everything. So we gotta stop it while we ahead, and they right on track with that. So I don't think they're gonna need all of that. No man can predict that. They doing what is right for their country and their nation and their people to survive. And that's all it is. Well, anyway, y'all, I gotta go. God bless. Peace.